Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to my complete review of War Sales, the first DLC for Mountain Blade to a Bannerlord. The DLC itself brings in full naval battles, 18 unique ship types, 3 new naval skills to level up, a map expansion and a rework, as well as an entirely new Viking-inspired faction, the Nords. Alongside it, the free update also adds improvements to graphics with a gorgeous new skybox and lighting, diplomacy tweaks, new quests and a Sturgeon unit tree of rework, and a ton more, including stealth and a wealth of other things. For today's video, however, I am going to be solely focusing entirely on the DLC itself. I've currently put in roughly around about 30 hours into the DLC so far, and I feel like I have a good solid grasp on the content, so in this review, I'll be giving my honest thoughts on whether the DLC is good and whether it's worth the $24.99 price tag. And if you're thinking of picking yourself up a sweet discount, you can use my Games Planet link below and code Jackie to save yourself 14%. They work directly with publishers to bring you legitimate Steam keys, and I get a little kickback, so I appreciate anybody who uses that link, and of course code Jackie. They've also been kind enough to give me a key to give away to you guys, so comment down below your favorite Bannerlord faction. It could even be the Nords if that's the faction you're most looking forward to, and I'll pick one lucky person to give a free copy of War Sales. I also want to be clear as well that I fully understand that many people are still really unhappy with the state of the base game. I think that is completely valid and understandable, but again, this review is going to be strictly about the content in the DLC and not whether or not the base game is barren or is lacking content. This video is actually sponsored by Tailworlds as well, so a massive thank you to them for helping me bring this review to you guys. There are absolutely no restrictions on things I can say, and everything in this video will still 100% be my opinion regardless of the sponsorship. This is also as well the first time I've really done a scripted review video like this, so if you guys did find this useful, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like and a comment down below. Let me know if you agree with the stuff I say in this video, or you disagree, or if there's other things that you are kind of really going to be looking into when you get the DLC, or kind of what's holding you back from getting the DLC. I'd be really interested to know. So let's get started. I think the ships are going to be the best place to start, as it is the core of the DLC. War Sales adds in 18 unique ship types grouped into styles based on faction regions rather than every faction getting their own unique full lineup. The Nords and the Sturgeons use longboats with huge deck spaces perfect for boarding. The Kuzites and the Azerai get sleeker, faster ships built for speed and skirmishing. The Landia relies on sturdy ships with scattered archer platforms, and the Empire gets the widest variety with artillery-focused ships and deadly rams. Though this is going to be where you're going to be finding these type of ships, I don't think the AI is actually locked to solely using these, so as territory gets conquered and they get access to different dockyards, they will probably be incorporating ships from different factions into their arsenal, especially if you end up with any turncoats who leave certain factions. I'm sure they're going to be bringing their cultural ships over to the newly joined faction. There are also trade ships which you'll usually raid on the campaign map when you're hitting caravans, or you'll be using them as support vessels later on down the campaign just to go ahead and kind of store all of your horses as you're traveling across the seas, or goods for trade itself, basically utilizing them for cargo capacity. Every ship can be equipped with visual functional upgrades, different sails, faster oars, expanded deck space, braziers for fire arrows, hull reinforcements, artillery pieces, and rams. The bigger the ships, the more upgrades you can also attain onto them. The lighter ships, I believe, can have about 4 upgrades, whereas the much larger ones can have anywhere above 8 upwards. So there's a lot more to upgrade. As you progress through the naval side of things, you're going to also be progressing and spending more money on these ships to actually upgrade them and keep them up to scratch. I'm a really big fan of this upgrade system. I think the ability to be able to dump your cash into improving the ships is a really cool idea. We're always lacking for stuff to spend our money on in the mid to late game, so this is a really nice thing, and you're obviously getting stuff from it. You're improving your ships, you're making it so that you are stronger in battle, and the upgrade system is really cool. I hope this is a system that they're going to bring forward in the future. Like, imagine this system with workshops or your army camp or your army itself. Like, there's lots of stuff that hopefully this will inspire later on down the line. Though I will say the only downside is that the upgrades mostly reinforce each ship's existing role. You can't, for example, turn a Nord longbow into a dedicated ramming ship, so it would be like really nice to be able to break the mold. You know, the Nord longships are troop transports that you use to board the enemy ships, but it would be really nice if you could maybe optimize them for a different role in your fleet, but they're not going to be as effective as like the Empire ships at ramming. But it'd be nice to give the Nords that little bit of option where they can kind of do something, maybe even if it's like a little bit less optimal than the other cultures. You'll just end up finding yourself in a situation where it's like, oh, I got Nord longboats, looks like I have to go ahead and board the enemy to kill them with my superior deck capacity. It kind of does get a bit monotonous that way, and as I said, it would be a nice way to keep things fresh, being able to actually split up these ships and kind of customizing them a bit on their own. But I will also say as well, my biggest disappointment when it does come to the ships themselves is the lack of cosmetic customization. You can, of course, when you do upgrade your ships with like better ores or a different hull or improved sails, it does visibly change, which is really cool. However, you can't like change the ship's colors or put your clan's banner on the sail itself. Ships of the same class all kind of look extremely similar, and it's a real shame, honestly, because I feel like being able to add that flair to your fleet, you know, putting bright pink ships, if that's what you wanted to do, would be really cool. But I mean, like, realistically, it would be nice just to kind of being able to put pictures on your sails or something, or just kind of give them that little bit of extra color to make each fleet feel different, and not just everybody's using longbows charging towards each other. Overall, I think the customization is good, just not great. As I said, I would have loved to have had unique ship sets for every single faction, Sturgier and Kuzites, maybe in the Azerai, or having kind of a little bit different ships, and also the ability to actually paint and decorate your ships to a greater extent would have, I think, gone a long way. However, they're still decent. It gets the job done. There's enough unique ships there to have a lot of fun with, and it's not like we're like just everybody's using the same ship. And as you travel around Calradi, you'll definitely notice like all the different ships come to bear. So yeah, overall, the ships are good, but could have been great, I guess. Next up, we have the naval battles. Now, naval battles are the main feature of War Sales. That's like the poster child. And I think that's the part that will ultimately make or break this DLC. So realistically, are they good? Well, the short answer is yes, but they're not mind-blowing. They're solid fun. They are definitely a massive improvement from the days of Britwalder, where ships slid towards each other like they were on rails. War Sales does give you complete open naval battles with multiple environments. We have the open sea, which is vast, and you can basically go anywhere you want. And then we also have winding rivers, which make obviously much more narrow engagements, so the larger fleets are going to definitely struggle on them, and encourage you for a much more of a boarding playstyle, whereas of course the open seas are going to encourage you for a bit more maneuverability and favor those more skirmisher heavy factions. You can command up to 8 ships, maneuvering freely, ordering boardings, or setting ships to skirmish mode, where the AI lieutenants will try to keep distances and pelt enemies with missiles. You can also choose between infantry heavy or archer heavy crew setups, though I'm honestly not sure why it isn't handled like it is in land battles, where you can simply just slide the troop count. It seems like a bit of a downgrade, not being able to specifically choose the type of soldiers I want on each ship. And yeah, a slider would have just been really nice. You can do it, as I said, in land battles, so why not in sea battles? I will also mention as well that there aren't a ton of commands when it comes to naval battles. You can, like, obviously command your soldiers to charge. You can tell them to defend your ship, which is an easy way of getting them back onto the ship. You'll obviously be manually taking care of your sails and your oar power, which is all really cool stuff, and obviously managing the wind, which is dedicated in the bottom right hand of your screen. So it's always fun messing around with that stuff and kind of optimizing your path with a perfect ram. However, you only really have a couple commands, and I know the AI definitely does do more stuff than that, so it'd be nice to actually have commands. And it's kind of disappointing we don't have commands for like dedicating to ramming and boarding and giving you more control over your ships in battle, rather than the simple AI skirmish mode. I think this like simple improvement of just giving you access to more of the AI options to like basically dictate your ships what to do, again, will go a long way of just enhancing these naval battles. Early game naval battles are definitely narrower since your clan tier limits your crew size. You'll often have enough men for a couple small ships. This pushes you towards a more simpler tactic like just running away with archer heavy ships or the classic Sun Tzu of F1, F3. When you reach the mid to late game, naval battles really shine. Big 8v8 fleet fights with ramming, artillery, boarding, flanking, and chaotic melee are generally so much fun. And the feeling of breaking a blockade of a siege and saving the city is just absolutely awesome. And when you have 700 sailors on either side of the battlefield, they really do come into their element. As for the AI, it's functional. It's not impressive, but it's functional. They mostly just sail at you and try and board you regardless of its numbers. It's basically the same logic as land battles, so don't expect naval geniuses out there, but they do reinforce their ships effectively and rarely break or get stuck. Storm effects and the factions' different ships definitely help keep the battles feeling fresh. Even in the early game can get kind of repetitive when you're fighting for your life and trying to survive fighting with the same ships. But honestly, my biggest disappointment, no naval sieges. You can blockade coastal cities, but the sieges itself will always be a land battle. Being able to assault ports directly from the sea would have been amazing, and I think something that people really wanted, so it is a massive shame that we don't have access to that. Jumping off of the boats onto the port and burning and attacking a city from the back would have been awesome in combined operations, and I think it's a real big miss that they didn't try and implement it in this DLC. Ultimately though, naval battles are a lot of fun. I think, as I said, in the early game, you'll find them maybe a little bit repetitive, but when you start getting to the larger army sizes, once you start joining armies and actually making armies of your own, they'll really start to open up and start coming a lot more crazy when you get access to the larger ships. I also think as well, ultimately, this is not going to be the sole thing that you're going to be doing. It's another option that you can utilize in the gameplay loop that isn't just fighting looters or sieging settlements over and over again. It's a nice way to break up the monotony. It gives you another way of playing the game, and I think when it comes to it, and it fits that role really well. And I've got to say, they've done a great job with that kind of balancing. I found myself not necessarily getting very bored of sieges, but almost looking forward to them, because I've just been out to sea fighting hard, killing bandits, fighting battles, and then boom, now I'm fighting sieges, and then I'm going back to naval battles. It's a nice way of just kind of implementing another way of playing the game, and it fits in, as I said, very well. The Nords are the first fully new faction added to Bannerlord, Viking inspired, no cavalry, and with a new roster, 2 infantry troop lines, as well as an archer troop line and a noble infantry troop line. The aesthetic of the faction is pretty awesome, great looking armor, great visual identity as this Viking force that we know and love from Warband. However, their performance is a little bit underwhelming. The low tier Nord infantry often gets wiped by equally tiered troops from other factions. Higher tier Nords also suffer from the same mediocre stats and relatively low statted armors. My main assumption is that this is because the Nord units have the marine buff that makes them stronger at sea, so Tailworlds kind of tone them down for the land combat. And honestly, I think this is such the wrong way to go with them for the most part, because you want them to be this massive infantry-based force that dominate at land, at sea, when the infantry gets stuck in with this awesome shield wall. You know, they don't really have a lot going for them outside of that infantry, and the fact that they don't have cavalry should be their negative, not the fact that their infantry just loses to Imperial legionaries. And on the campaign map itself, the Nords are positioned next to the Khuzaits, so they really have that heavy cavalry faction to kind of stop them in their tracks if they try and get a bit too greedy on the campaign map. Though they have already received a small buff in armors, I expect to see many more coming forward. Again, they just kind of lack that punch on the battlefield that you want to feel. Of course, they're great at sea, but it doesn't mean that they just all of a sudden forget how to fight on land. And the lack of that survivability, I think, is the biggest problem. Because they can't survive, they end up dying quite often because of their lower statted armors. They then don't reach the higher ranks where their units do kind of really come into their own. But as I mentioned, I do expect them to probably get a stat buff quite quickly after launch. launch, so I wouldn't be surprised if this point is a bit invalid going forward. The Nords also have a pretty cool character set up, and they have a very elderly king, which is quite cool. So if you're on fast mode, you'll generally see the king die relatively quickly in your campaign, and that gives a nice fresh take on it, as his sons will take over and kind of shake up the campaign. Whereas if you're not playing on fast mode, or even if you are playing on fast mode, the chances are he might also survive. You know, it is kind of a roll of the dice at his old age. I also noticed as well from my time playing that the AI is also extremely aggressive towards coastal settlements. I honestly don't know if this is specifically designed for that, but in one of my campaigns, they took a large portion of the Valandian coastline and they didn't really push any further inland. This kind of fits their playstyle, as you can reinforce from the sea in sieges and not suffer any negatives. You don't lose soldiers breaking in because you're reinforcing from the sea, and I felt like that really kind of fit their playstyle. And again, I'm not sure if it's intended or just kind of a lucky circumstance, but again, it was really cool to see kind of the Nords utilizing that playstyle, and I don't know, it just felt really thematic, and it felt like it really fit the actual faction as a whole. Overall, I think it is a cool addition. They have great visuals, but the units themselves kind of lack that punch. They also kind of stole a bit of Sturgia's vibe, I would say, as well, and Sturgia don't really get much else in the way of like replacement for that. Again, I know Sturgia is more of a Slavic Kievan Rus culture, but for the most part they kind of did fit that role in Bannerlord, and now that the Nords are here, they kind of feel a bit like, not useless, but they just kind of feel a bit like they're overshadowed by the Nords. But maybe that is just the more recent DLC coming out, and that's kind of a hot topic, and the Sturgians will maybe come back a little bit as we go further forward into the game cycle. But yeah, overall, I think the Nords are great. I just wish they were a little bit stronger on the ground, and they would be units to fear. I'd still take Imperial Legionaries over pretty much any single unit. Again, I wouldn't go out of my way to get Norse units like I would Britannian Thanes, Imperial Legionaries, Imperial Cataphracts, or the Khazite Noble Guard, your Khan's Guard. They're the units I would go out of my way to get in my campaigns, whereas I think as a single Nord unit, I'd be like, oh yeah, that I need to have that in my army. The DLC also expands the campaign map northwards, adding in a new island, widening rivers, and including huge bodies of water that are all traversable with your ship. The new Nord lands do look incredible. The harsh highlands, the rugged terrain, and the atmosphere of wilderness really comes into its own. The siege maps themselves are awesome. Wooden forts and stone strongholds are all heavily Norse inspired, and they are honestly some of the best in the entire game, giving a nice fresh lick of paint to sieges, and I'm very genuinely excited to siege more of the Norse settlements. I feel like Tale Worlds as a whole have really improved their siege maps, and you can definitely tell from siege maps that were probably made like 7 years ago to more of the maps that do just kind of fit the game better, not only with the larger walls giving you more access to maneuver armies and stuff, but also just the aesthetic themselves and where breaches are pinpointed. I think all the maps over the past probably about 2 years have really enhanced the actual siege gameplay, and the Norses take that to the extreme. Settlements have also been shifted around as well. Britannia now actually has a coastal city, and they actually seem to be able to hold on to the city for once. Britannia actually are holding their own in all of my campaigns, so again, that is definitely a first. They've also added in 2 new resources to the game with the whale oil and the tusks. It is a very cool idea, these new exclusive resources. However, I kind of wish they were exclusive just to the Nordic islands, and that's kind of the reason why they colonized that territory. At the moment, they will appear in places like Valandia and Sturgia, and I kind of feel like that just takes a bit of the way. Like, it gives me no real reason to specifically visit the brand new island that they've implemented, as well as the new Norse lands, when I can just go and pick these resources up on trade missions in Sturgia or along the Valandian coast, which again, I feel like is a bit of a missed opportunity. This unique resource up on a brandly colonized island would have been so cool to maybe launch my trade ships from the Azerite, dodge the new Corsairs and Sea Raiders, and go and get these resources and bring them back, and they're rare, so I end up making a lot of money on them, and that's kind of a really cool idea. Now I can just kind of pop out the river, go to Valandia, and then come back, and it's a bit like, it wasn't really an adventure, was it? So I do think it is a bit of a missed opportunity. However, we also do get, as I mentioned, new sea bandits. The Sea Raiders finally have found their sea legs and have their boats. They are very brutal. They have access to a lot of javelins, and they will punish you if you're not careful. The Corsairs are definitely the easier of the targets and the ones I recommend you going after if you're planning on killing them. They are lightly armored, which does make things a bit easier. They also don't have as good javelins as well, so your soldiers aren't going to die as often, allowing you to do more battles themselves. Again, nice, pretty cool. I think they do fit. I don't really need any more bandits. You have Sea Raiders in the north, Corsairs in the south. That's fine. Though maybe a new bandit type would have been cool with the deserters. Actually having deserters at sea as well, I think actually maybe could have given you a more of a mid-game threat, as the Sea Raiders and Corsairs only sit around about 40 to 60 soldiers. So when you progress that, they're going to be pretty much a walk in the park when you hit the mid to late game. Overall, I think the map expansion was sorely needed, and it does give the world a fantastic facelift. And yes, the disconnected rivers in the bottom right are pretty interesting. There's a river that goes all the way basically up from the south to the Kuzite lands, and it doesn't connect to anything else. So and all the terrain itself is also textured as well, so maybe that is going to be the next DLC if they do decide to make one, or maybe even a free update with a new faction coming in down there. It just seems a little bit odd not to have to implement that river and widen it and texture all that stuff, and there being nothing there. I'm definitely keeping my eyes on you, Tale Worlds. One thing I am genuinely a bit disappointed with this DLC though is that there are no new raiding improvements with a Viking inspired DLC. I think it's such a missed opportunity not to improve the current raiding mechanic. At the moment you just click attack and raid and you fight the militia and then you raid the settlement. It would have been so nice to give us some scenes where we went in and maybe started burning houses and ambushing peasants with like the new stealth mechanic. Kind of we run up and we hit a few people and then everybody charges in, and really kind of capture that Viking inspired raging would have been really cool. You can kind of do it with the fact that you can bring your ship up to coast, start raiding a settlement, and if enemy armies come towards you, normally they would have caught you and killed you on land, but you can quickly jump on your ship and run away and it's absolutely fine. So it does kind of work in that sense, but I'm still sad that there are no new mechanics to really enhance that experience. So I think I've basically covered everything in the DLC, so here is my final score. I'm going to rate it about a 7 out of 10. I think a solid 7 out of 10. And it's not an IGN 7 out of 10, it's a real 7 out of 10, where 5 is the average and 10 is like the ultimate best thing I've ever played, aka hot butter. It's definitely a solid first DLC that lays the foundations for future editions. Everything works, and even the disappointing parts aren't really a deal breaker. Naval battles are fun, and the Nord factions add great spice, and generally feels refreshing in the mid to late game to be able to split up the siege monotony with different ways to play the game. Land battles, sieges, now naval battles, trading, moving around, fighting looters, upgrading your ship, all that stuff is actually quite great. I think if you're a huge fan of Bannerlord, this is definitely a must buy. You should go out and grab it and have fun. And I think as well, if you are returning after a long break, this with the combination of the 1.3 update that adds in stealth, diplomacy, new lighting, improvements of graphics, and a whole wealth of other things, the whole experience will feel like a big update. If you are still on the fence, then I think maybe play 1.3, see how you feel, and then jump into War Sales, as it is also having a 10% off Steam sale at launch directly with Tale Worlds. And of course, if you want to, you can use my Games Planet link that gives you 14% off, and this is all the way through until the end of 2025. As always though, Bannerlord does go on sale quite often, so I don't think you're going to be too crazy if you did want to wait for a better sale, as I'm sure the game will go on sale probably towards the mid to end of next year. However, I want to say a big thank you to everybody for checking out my review of War Sales. I hope you found it useful, and if you could drop a like and comment down below, it'd mean the world to me. You can also check out my War Sales Let's Play. I'll put that down below in the description if you want to see some gameplay before jumping in, and I'll see you in the next one.